The blue light of the smartphone screen cast a cold glow on Amara's face in the darkness of their bedroom. Beside her, Tunde slept peacefully, his soft, rhythmic breathing a stark contrast to the frantic, envious pace of her own heart. Her thumb moved in a hypnotic, endless scroll through a curated world of perfection. There was Ngozi, her university roommate, posing in front of the Eiffel Tower, her designer handbag dangling carelessly from her arm. There was Chitty, a former colleague, showing off the keys to a brand new SUV, his wife beaming beside him in their spacious, modern kitchen. Each image was a sharp needle pricking at Amara's contentment. She zoomed in on a photo of a couple she knew vaguely, their table laden with expensive champagne and gourmet food at a rooftop restaurant. They were toasting, their smiles wide, their lives seemingly untouched by the mundane struggles of bills, routine, and making ends meet. Amara's eyes then drifted from the luminous screen to the shadows of her own reality. The faint crack in the ceiling they couldn't afford to fix, the faded curtain she had sewn herself, the simple wooden dresser that had been a hand-me-down from Tunde's parents. A heavy sigh escaped her lips. This humble, two-room apartment in the Aikja outskirts of Lagos, once a symbol of their hopeful beginning, now felt like a cage of inadequacy. Tunde, her kind, hard-working husband who repaired electronics in a small shop, suddenly felt less like a partner and more like an anchor holding her back from the glittering life she saw through her screen. The weight of comparison settled on her chest, a thick, suffocating blanket of dissatisfaction. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window as Tunde carefully arranged a small bouquet of wildflowers in a simple glass jar. He had woken up early, a familiar ache in his heart from sensing Amara's distance the night before. He didn't understand the digital world that consumed her, but he understood her. He knew the light in her eyes was dimming, and he, a man of action, not words, was determined to rekindle it with the tools he had: devotion and diligence. He prepared her favorite breakfast, moi wrapped in fresh leaves, fried plantains, and a perfectly brewed cup of tea. On a small note card, he wrote in his neat, blocky handwriting, "For my beautiful wife, may your day be as bright as your smile." He carried the tray into the bedroom, his heart swelling with a hopeful affection. Amara was already awake, but her attention was not on him. She was propped against the pillows, her phone in hand, her brow furrowed as she watched a video tour of a massive, newly built house. "Look at this, Tunde," she said, her voice tinged with a wistful ache, not even glancing at the tray. 5 bedrooms, can you imagine?" Tunde's smile faltered slightly. He placed the tray on her lap. "I brought you breakfast," he said softly. "Oh, thanks," Amara murmured, absently picking up a piece of plantain, her eyes still glued to the screen, scrolling to see the swimming pool. Tunde stood there for a moment, watching her, the loving note hidden beneath the plate, the carefully arranged flowers going unnoticed. The small, warm gesture he had poured his heart into was just background noise to the symphony of envy playing in her mind. Later that afternoon, a sharp knock at the door broke the silence. It was their neighbor, Mrs. Ijoma, a woman in her late 40s whose life was a performance of acquired wealth. She was draped in a loud, expensive-looking Ankara print, gold jewelry jangling on her wrists. "Amara, my dear, you simply must come," she announced, waving a glitter-embellished invitation. "My husband's business partner is throwing a party at their Victoria Island penthouse. It's the event of the season. Everyone will be there." Amara's eyes widened, a thrill of excitement mixed with a pang of insecurity shooting through her. Victoria Island, penthouse. These were words from the world on her screen, now knocking on her very door. "Oh, Mrs. Ijoma, I'd love to," she stammered, already mentally scanning her wardrobe for something suitable. "What should I wear?" Mrs. Ijoma looked her up and down with a practiced, slightly pitying eye. "Wear your best, dear. These are important people. Not like these." She gestured vaguely at the surrounding apartments, commoners. As Mrs. Ijoma left in a cloud of strong perfume, Amara clutched the invitation, her heart racing. This was her chance to step into that glamorous world, even if just for a night. When Tunde came home, tired and smelling of solder and grease, she excitedly showed him the invite. He looked at it, then at her shining eyes, and felt a knot of worry tighten in his stomach. "That sounds expensive, Amara. and those crowds. He began, but she cut him off. Don't be so boring, Tunde. This is a real opportunity for us to network, to be seen. She didn't see his concern for their budget or his discomfort with pretentious crowds. She only saw his reluctance as another failure to measure up. The night of the party, Amara felt like Cinderella, wearing her best dress, a deep blue Asok gown she had saved for months to buy. Tunde looked handsome but uncomfortable in his slightly too tight formal suit. The penthouse was everything she had dreamed of and more. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a breathtaking view of the Lagos Lagoon, waiters circulating with trays of delicate hors d'oeuvres and champagne flutes. The air hummed with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Amara was mesmerized. She watched a couple, the hosts, gliding through the room. The husband, a portly man named Chief, had his arm possessively around his wife's waist, his fingers heavy with gold rings. The wife, Adesua, was a vision in silk and diamonds, her laugh a tinkling, perfect sound. "They are the perfect couple, aren't they?" Mrs. Ijoma whispered to Amara. "So much love, so much success." Amara nodded, her heart aching with want. She watched another young couple, Kunal and Faye, playfully feeding each other cake, their affection a public spectacle. She glanced at Tunde, who was standing awkwardly by the balcony, trying to make small talk with a man who was clearly uninterested. In this gilded room, Tunde's quiet, genuine nature seemed out of place, almost embarrassing. The more she absorbed the glamour, the more her own life, her own husband, seemed drab and insignificant. The love she shared with Tunde, which had always felt solid and real, now felt cheap and ordinary next to this dazzling performance of wealth and romance. The car ride home was thick with a tense silence. The magic of the penthouse had evaporated, leaving behind the gritty reality of Lagos traffic and the cramped interior of their old car. The spell was broken, but the poison remained. "Did you see the watch Kunal was wearing?" Amara finally said, her voice sharp with resentment. "Must have cost more than your shop makes in a year." Tunde gripped the steering wheel tighter, saying nothing. "And Faye," Amara continued, the champagne and envy loosening her tongue. "She told me her husband surprises her with a new piece of jewelry every month. Every month, Tunde. When was the last time you surprised me with anything?" This was the final straw. Tunde's patience, which had been a deep, wide river, finally hit a rock. "I surprised you with breakfast this morning, Amara," he said, his voice low and strained with hurt. "You did not even taste it. You were too busy looking at other people's houses on that phone." His words, so quiet and true, should have shamed her. Instead, they ignited her defensiveness. "That is not a surprise. That is your duty as a husband. I am talking about real gestures like the ones we saw tonight. Those men know how to treat their wives. They provide. They show them off. I feel invisible with you." The words hung in the air, cruel and final. Tunde flinched as if physically struck. He pulled the car over to the side of the road, not trusting himself to drive. He stared out the windshield, his jaw clenched, the muscles in his forearm taut. The love and effort he poured into their life together, his last coin of devotion, had just been thrown back in his face as worthless. The quiet, humble foundation of their marriage had its first, deep and painful crack. A few days later, the tension in the small apartment was a physical presence, as thick and heavy as the Lagos humidity. Tunde had become quieter, his movements around the house careful, as if trying to occupy as little space as possible. Amara, meanwhile, moved with a restless, frustrated energy. Tunde's sister, Chinier, a warm and perceptive woman with eyes that missed nothing, visited under the guise of bringing fresh oranges from her tree. She found Amara in the kitchen, aggressively scrubbing a pot, her shoulders tight with unhappiness. "Kedu, N1IM brother?" Chinier asked gently, placing the oranges on the counter. "How are you?" Amara sighed, a dramatic, weary sound. "I am fine, sister, just fine." Chinier leaned against the counter, watching her. "This fine looks a lot like a storm cloud. I have seen the way you look at Tunde these days, and I saw you return from that party on Victoria Island. The glitter from that place is still in your eyes, but it has left a darkness in your heart." Amara stopped scrubbing, defensive. "It is not a crime to want more, Chinier, to want a life that is shining." Chinier nodded slowly. "No, it is not, but be careful, my sister. The sun can shine on a rubbish heap, making it look like gold from a distance. The couples you admire with their big cars and loud laughter, sometimes the loudest laughter is used to cover the quietest tears. Do not be so quick to trade the real yam in your pot for the painted one in your neighbor's pot. Her words, steeped in proverbial wisdom, were meant to be a balm, but to Amara's inflamed envy they felt like a criticism. She dismissed them with a wave of her hand. "You sound just like Tunde, always settling, always afraid of more. I am tired of settling." Chinier simply looked at her with a sad, knowing expression, picked up her basket, and left, the unheeded warning hanging in the air between them. Chinier's warning was quickly forgotten, buried under a fresh wave of digital envy. That evening, curled on their modest sofa, Amara's scroll led her to the profile of Adesua, the elegant woman from the party. Her feed was a breathtaking tapestry of luxury, a photo shoot in a new designer outfit, a video of her being surprised with a luxury car, a picture of a perfectly set table for a romantic private dinner on a vast, empty beach. The caption read, "My king does it again. Always making me feel like a queen, blessed perfect marriage." A hot spike of frustration shot through Amara. She looked across the room at Tunde, who was meticulously sorting a box of electrical components, his brow furrowed in concentration. The quiet, mundane reality of her life felt like a personal failure. Why couldn't Tunde be more like these men? Why was their love so ordinary? She didn't see the dedication in his focus, the quiet pride he took in his work. She only saw the absence of grand public gestures. She slammed her phone face down on the cushion, the action causing Tunde to look up, a question in his eyes. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Everything is fine," Amara snapped, the bitterness leaking out. "Just fine." She stood up and walked to the bedroom, leaving him alone in the living room, the gulf between them widening into a chasm that neither knew how to cross. She felt trapped, not by her marriage, but by the dazzling, unattainable image of what she believed a marriage should be. Determined to bridge the growing distance, Tunde decided to try again. He used a small portion of the money he had been secretly saving to buy a new soldering iron to get something special for Amara. He bought her favorite fish, Titus *, and spent the afternoon carefully preparing a romantic dinner. He cleared the small table in their living room, lit a single candle he found in a drawer, and even dug out the old portable speaker to play some of the highlife music they used to dance to when they first dated. His heart was a fragile mix of hope and fear. When Amara returned from a visit to her friend, she walked into the dimly lit room. The smell of fried fish and spices filled the air. For a fleeting second, surprise and perhaps a flicker of the old warmth crossed her face. But it was quickly replaced by a weary resignation. "What is all this, Tunde?" she asked, her voice flat. I just thought we could have a nice dinner. Together," he said, his hope deflating like a punctured balloon. She sighed, dropping her bag onto a chair. "It's sweet, Tunde, but I already ate at Blessing's place. Her husband ordered takeaway from that new Chinese restaurant on the island." She didn't see the effort, the sacrifice, the love poured into the simple, home-cooked meal. She only saw another instance where her husband's offering fell short of the glamorous standards set by others. She picked up her phone, scrolling through the pictures of the Chinese food Blessing had just posted, and walked into the bedroom, leaving Tunde alone with the carefully set table, the cooling food, and the crushing weight of his unappreciated love. The unspoken disappointment from the failed dinner simmered for 2 days, looking for an outlet. It finally found one in the most trivial of things, a cup of tea. Tunde, tired from a long day and feeling the emotional strain, made himself a cup of tea and sat down to watch the news. Amara, coming out of the bedroom, saw the single cup on the table. "You didn't think to make one for me?" she asked, her tone laced with accusation. Tunde, his patience worn thin, replied without thinking, "You are a grown woman, Amara. Could make your own tea." It was the wrong thing to say. The dam broke. "Is that what you think of me?" she fired back, her voice rising. "That I'm just a grown woman you don't have to care for? Is that why we live in this box? Is that why you never think to do anything special for me, because I should just do everything for myself?" Her words were no longer just about tea. They were about every perceived slight, every unmet expectation. Tund stood up, his own frustration boiling over. I do everything for you. I work all day in that hot shop. I come home and try to make you happy, but nothing is ever enough. You want tea? I will make you tea. You want a penthouse? I cannot give you that. The rare outburst shocked them both into a tense silence. Amara stared at him, her chest heaving before turning on her heel and retreating to the bedroom, slamming the door. Tund sank back into his chair, the untouched cup of tea now cold, the familiar quiet of the apartment feeling more like a verdict than a peace. Seeking solace and validation, Amara went to visit her old friend, Blessing, the one with the seemingly perfect life and the husband who ordered takeaway from fancy restaurants. She found Blessing not in her spacious living room, but in the bedroom, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. The glamorous Instagram posts were a stark contrast to the woman crying on the edge of her king-sized bed. "Blessing, what is wrong?" Amara asked, startled. Blessing wiped her eyes, a bitter smile on her face. "He moved out, Amara, 2 days ago. The takeaway king has gone to stay with his girlfriend in Lekki." Amara was stunned. "Girlfriend, but your posts, you looked so happy." Blessing let out a hollow laugh. "Happy? I was dying inside. All of that," she gestured vaguely at the phone on her dresser, "was a show. I was trying so hard to make everyone, maybe even myself, believe we were okay. But behind the pictures, we were strangers in this big, empty house." She looked at Amara, her gaze intense. "Don't be fooled by what you see online, Amara. Don't be like me, comparing your inside to everyone else's outside. That man of yours, Tund, he looks at you with real love in his eyes. That is worth more than all the designer bags and Chinese takeaway in the world." The words struck Amara with the force of a physical blow. The first seed of genuine doubt was planted, and for the first time, the perfect images on her screen began to look less like aspirations and more like carefully constructed lies. Despite the jarring truth from Blessing's confession, the habit of comparison was a deep-rooted vine, difficult to extricate. At a family gathering for Tund's nephew's birthday, Amara found herself once again measuring their life against others. When Tund's cousin, a boisterous man named Emeka, boasted about his recent promotion and new car, Amara's smile was tight. Later, as Tund was happily playing with the children, laughing as he gave them piggyback rides, Emeka's wife, Nneka, remarked, "Tund is so good with children, such a natural father." Instead of feeling pride, Amara felt a fresh wave of inadequacy. "Yes," she said, a subtle, critical edge to her voice. "He is very good at playing, if only he were as focused on more serious pursuits." The comment, made just loud enough for Tund to overhear, landed like a stone. He froze mid-laugh, the joy draining from his face. He slowly put the child down, his broad shoulders slumping almost imperceptibly. He had always believed his gentle, playful nature was a strength, a gift he could offer a future family. Now, Amara had framed it as a childish distraction from the real work of providing. The rest of the gathering, Tund was quiet, retreating into a shell. Amara saw his withdrawal but misread it as sullenness, fueling her own frustration. The ride home was silent, the gulf between them now filled with the chilling water of resentment and hurt. The hurt from the family gathering festered for days. Tund moved through the apartment like a ghost, performing his chores mechanically. The final straw came when he was fixing the hinge on the bedroom door. Amara was on a video call with an old friend and he overheard her lamenting, "I just wish he had more ambition, you know. He's content with his little repair shop. There's no fire, no drive to be more." The words, spoken so casually to a third party, felt like a betrayal deeper than any argument. The little repair shop was his father's legacy, a business he had built with his own hands, a source of honest living and community respect. To hear her dismiss it and him so utterly shattered something inside him. That night, as they prepared for bed in silence, Tund did not lie down. He stood by the window looking out at the city lights. "Amara," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I have heard your words. I have felt your disappointment. I cannot be the man in the pictures on your phone. I am just me, Tund, the man who fixes things." He took a deep breath. "And I am tired of trying to fix something you seem determined to break." He then said the words that filled Amara with a cold dread. "I think I should go to my brother's place in Ibadan for a few days to think." He was not shouting, not angry. He was defeated. And in that quiet defeat, Amara finally saw the devastating impact of her comparisons. The day before Tunde was set to leave, they were invited to a child's dedication ceremony. The atmosphere between them was icy. At the event, Amara found herself once again observing Kunal and Faye, the perfect couple from the party. They were, as usual, the center of attention, laughing and holding hands. Needing a moment away from the stifling perfection, Amara stepped out onto the balcony for some air. As she rounded the corner, she stopped short. There, hidden from the main party, were Kunal and Faye, but they were not laughing. Faye had tears streaming down her face, her makeup smudged. "You embarrassed me in there," she hissed at Kunal, her voice low but venomous. "You always do, flirting with anything in a skirt." Kunal's face was a mask of cold contempt. "Keep your voice down, you hysterical woman. Do you want to ruin everything? Just smile for the pictures like you always do." He straightened his agbada and walked back to the party, leaving Faye sobbing silently against the wall. Amara retreated, her heart hammering in her chest. The image of their public affection and this private warfare collided in her mind. Chinyer's warning about the loudest laughter covering the quietest tears echoed with terrifying clarity. The perfect picture shattered, revealing the cracked, painful reality beneath the glossy surface. Tunde, wanting to do one last meaningful thing before his trip, had organized a small community outreach with his church group, repairing old electronics for families who couldn't afford it. He didn't ask Amara to come, but she, shaken and feeling the impending void of his absence, went anyway. She watched him. She saw the way he patiently explained to an elderly woman how to use the radio he had fixed for her. She saw the genuine, unforced smile on his face when a little boy's eyes lit up at getting his tablet back. She saw the respect in the eyes of the people he helped. This was not for show. There were no social media posts, no flashy gestures. This was Tunde, ambition, not to accumulate wealth, but to be a source of quiet stability and kindness in his community. As she watched him wipe sweat from his brow, his hands skilled and sure, a profound sense of shame washed over her. She had been so busy looking at other people's highlight reels that she had become blind to the beautiful, authentic documentary of her own life playing out right in front of her. That evening, the silence in the apartment was different. It was no longer charged with Amara's resentment, but with her dawning realization. She watched Tunde pack a small bag, his movements slow and heavy. The flicker of guilt she had felt at the community project now grew into a steady flame. She noticed things she had long taken for granted. The way he always made sure the door was locked at night, the way he quietly filled her water glass and placed it by her bedside, the small, unconscious sigh he made when he was worried. These were not the grand gestures of a billionaire, but the quiet, consistent language of a love that was present, that showed up every day. She thought of Faye's tear-streaked face, of Blessing's empty mansion, and then of Tunde's patient hands fixing a child's toy. The scales were finally beginning to fall from her eyes. The envy that had clouded her vision for months was receding, and for the first time, she saw the stark, unflattering portrait of the wife she had become, critical, ungrateful, and blind to the treasure she possessed. As Tunde zipped his bag, Amara felt a cold fear. He was not just going to Ibadan. He was walking away from the woman she had been, and she was terrified he might not want to come back to the woman she needed to become. The morning Tunde was to leave for Ibadan. The air in the small apartment was thick with unspoken words. He moved quietly, placing a few simple items into his bag, a clear signal this was not a long journey but a profound retreat. Amara watched him from the kitchen doorway, her usual morning criticism trapped in her throat, replaced by a cold, gripping fear. She had imagined his departure as a dramatic, anger-filled event, but this quiet, sorrowful preparation was far worse. It felt final. He wasn't running away from a fight, he was walking away from a losing battle. He finished packing and stood by the door, keys in hand. He didn't look at her with anger, but with a deep, weary sadness that broke her heart. "I will call you when I arrive," was all he said, his voice flat. The door clicked shut behind him, a sound as loud as a gunshot in the silent apartment. Amara stood frozen, the reality of his absence crashing down on her. The space he occupied, which she had so often resented for its simplicity, now felt terrifyingly empty. She was alone with the echoing silence and the devastating realization that her constant comparisons had not been a push for a better life, but a push that might have ended her marriage. Alone, the apartment seemed to amplify every one of her toxic thoughts, throwing them back at her. She picked up her phone, a reflex, but the images of perfect lives now felt hollow, even mocking. She put it down and walked through the rooms. Her eyes fell on the small, slightly crooked bookshelf Tunde had built for her with scrap wood, a project she had scoffed at. Now she saw the care in its sanded edges. She sat on the sofa and remembered the countless evenings he had massaged her feet after a long day without her ever asking. She thought of the time he sold his favorite watch to pay for a doctor's bill when she was sick. These were not the grand, Instagrammable gestures she craved, but they were the pillars that had held their life together. The lack she had felt was not in her marriage, but in her own perception. A torrent of memories washed over her, Tunde's patient laughter, his unwavering calm during crises, the safe, steady feeling of his presence. She had been so busy photographing her life to compare it to others that she had forgotten to actually live it, to feel the profound depth of the ordinary, steadfast love she had been blessed with. On the bus to Ibadan, Tunde stared out the window at the blurring landscape. The anger had subsided, leaving behind a profound hurt. He replayed their years together, wondering where he had failed. Had he not loved her enough, provided enough? He thought of the small repair shop, his father's pride, and felt a sting of shame that Amara saw it as a symbol of failure. He asked himself the painful question, was he the problem? Was his simple, content nature a flaw in a world that demanded relentless ambition and visible success? For the first time, he considered not returning, of starting anew somewhere. His quiet way of being wasn't a constant disappointment. The thought brought him no peace, only a deeper sadness. Meanwhile, back in the empty apartment, Amara's reflection was taking a different turn. The silence was no longer an accusation but a teacher. She realized Tunde's trip wasn't an act of abandonment, but a necessary consequence of her actions. He had finally stopped trying to fix their marriage alone and had stepped back, forcing her to finally look at the one thing she had been avoiding, herself. Determined to fill the emptiness with something other than self-pity, Amara remembered an elderly neighbor, Mama Nkechi, who lived alone and often struggled with chores. Swallowing her pride, she went over and offered to help clean. Mama Nkechi, surprised but grateful, welcomed her in. As Amara swept and tidied the small room, Mama Nkechi talked about her late husband. He was not a rich man, she said, her eyes misty, but he was a good man. He held my hand every single night for 40 years. That was his surprise. She looked at Amara. These days, young people want the show. They don't want the substance. But the show ends, my child. The substance is what remains. The words, so similar to Chinyer's and Blessings, finally found fertile ground in Amara's heart. In the simple act of serving without expectation of reward or social media validation, she felt a genuine satisfaction she hadn't experienced in months. It was a quiet joy, born of connection and compassion, not comparison. It was real. When Tunde returned 3 days later, he was braced for more criticism. He opened the door to a clean apartment and the smell of his favorite soup, egusi. Amara stood nervously in the kitchen. "Welcome home," she said, her voice soft. He simply nodded, cautious. Over dinner, the silence was tense. Finally, Amara spoke. "Tunde, I am sorry." The words were clumsy, inadequate. "I have been a foolish woman. I was looking at other people's plates instead of being grateful for the food on my own." She couldn't yet articulate the full depth of her realization that she had been the source of their misery. Tunde listened, his expression unreadable. He saw her sincerity, but the wounds were still fresh. "Thank you for saying that, Amara," he replied, his tone careful, guarded. He did not say, "I forgive you." He did not pull her into an embrace. The apology was a first step, a seed planted on rocky, damaged soil. It was a beginning, but the trust that had been broken would need more than words to be rebuilt. The path to healing, they both silently understood, was only just beginning. The cautious atmosphere lingered for 2 days, a fragile truce where both moved carefully around each other, the ghost of past arguments haunting their small home. The bridge was tested by a sudden practical crisis. A violent evening storm lashed against the windows, and with a loud crack, a large branch from the neem tree in the compound smashed through the kitchen window, sending shards of glass and pouring rain across the floor. For a moment, they both stood frozen, the chaos mirroring the state of their relationship. Then instinct took over. Without a word, Tunde rushed to move the electronics and the small fridge away from the downpour. Amara, grabbing every available bucket and towel, began stemming the flood and sweeping up the glass. They worked in a frantic, synchronized dance for 20 minutes, their movements speaking a language of shared necessity that words had failed to achieve. When the immediate crisis was contained, they stood panting in the damp, dim kitchen, soaked to the skin. Tunde looked at Amara, her hair plastered to her face, her dress drenched, and he saw not the critical wife of the past months, but the resilient partner he had married. A faint, weary smile touched his lips. "We make a good team when we are fighting the storm, not each other," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Amara met his gaze, her eyes welling with tears that mixed with the rain on her cheeks. It was not a grand, romantic moment, but a moment of raw, shared reality. In the collaborative effort to save their home, they had found the first, solid stone on which to rebuild their connection. Amara began the conscious, difficult work of unlearning the habit of comparison. It was a daily battle. She muted the social media accounts that had been her poison and started a small, private journal. Instead of listing her lacks, she began to document the small, tangible evidences of Tunde's love that she had long ignored. "Today, Tunde fixed Mama Nkechai's radio for free," she wrote one evening. "He came home with no extra money, but with a light in his eyes." Another entry read, "He remembered I had a headache and made me ginger tea without my asking." She started actively looking for these quiet acts of service, training her eyes to see the gold she already possessed instead of the fool's gold on distant shores. She also began to notice his quiet generosity, how he always bought extra bread for the street children near his shop, how he patiently taught his apprentice without shouting. She saw the deep respect he commanded in their community, not for his wealth, but for his character. The man she had dismissed as lacking ambition was, in fact, rich in the currency that truly mattered: integrity and kindness. The flicker of guilt transformed into a steady flame of admiration and a profound, shame-filled love for the man she had so carelessly undervalued. One evening, as they sat on the repaired balcony enjoying the cool night air, the silence between them was no longer tense but contemplative. Encouraged by Amara's sustained change, Tunde finally broke his own silence. "When my father died," he began, his voice low and steady, "he left me two things, that shop and a mountain of debt. For 3 years I worked day and night. I slept on the floor of that shop. I ate 1 meal a day. Every naira I earned went a paying off what he owed to protect his name." Amara listened, her breath caught in her throat. He had never told her this. "When I finally paid the last debt," he continued, "the first thing I did was save for your bride price. I did not want to bring you into a life of debt. For me, this life we have, this peace, this small home with no one knocking at our door for money, this is not settling, Amara. This is my victory. This is the dream I fought for." The revelation was a thunderclap. The lack of ambition she had scorned was, in fact, the profound ambition of a man who had conquered his past to build a stable, honest future for them. She finally saw the depth of his sacrifice and the immense strength of his character. She began to weep, not out of pity, but out of a devastating understanding of how deeply she had misjudged the hero she had been married to all along. Armed with this new understanding, Amara's journey transformed. It was no longer just about stopping a bad habit. It was about actively building a new perspective, a new lens through which to view her life. She started a gratitude practice, verbally thanking Tunde for the small things, for taking out the trash, for his calm presence, for the simple fact of his coming home to her every night. She began to invest the energy she had wasted on envy into their home, not to impress others, but to create a sanctuary for them. She planted herbs in old containers on the balcony, adding fresh scents to their meals. She saved up and bought a beautiful, second-hand fabric to make new curtains, not because she was ashamed of the old ones, but because she wanted to beautify the space they shared. The couple began talking about real dreams, not the fantasies sold on social media, but their shared hopes. They started a joint savings plan for a future expansion of Tunde's shop, a goal that felt exciting and unifying. The lingering tensions did not vanish overnight. Sometimes, an old, critical thought would surface, but Amara had now learned to recognize it, to challenge it, and to choose gratitude instead. They were growing closer, their bond reforged in the fires of honesty and tempered by a newfound, mutual respect. The story's first part concluded not with a dramatic reconciliation, but with a quiet, hopeful moment of shared peace. After a simple dinner they had cooked together, Amara and Tunde sat on mats on their small balcony, looking out at the evening sky as stars began to pierce the fatting orange light. The air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of the city and the scent of the herbs she had planted. Amara reached over and took Tunde's hand, her fingers lacing with his. It was a simple gesture, but it held the weight of their entire journey, the hurt, the silence, the storm, the confession, and the slow, tender regrowth of trust. He squeezed her hand in return, a silent acceptance. They did not speak. They simply sat together, watching the day end. There was no pretense of a perfect marriage, no performance for an unseen audience. There was only the quiet acknowledgement of the love that had survived the drought of her discontent, and the work that still lay ahead to fully water the garden of their relationship. Under the vast, impartial sky, their humble balcony felt not like a place of lack, but a place of profound, hard-won contentment. The audience is left with a powerful reflection, that the richest marriages are not those that look best from the outside, but those that feel most true on the inside, built not on comparison, but on the quiet, daily choice to see and cherish the treasure one already holds.